Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here, and today I want to talk about revolvers, specifically single action revolvers versus double action revolvers, and what each type of revolver is good for. Single action versus double action refers to the firing mechanism that the gun has. So, if you look at this Ruger Blackhawk here in 41 Magnum, and all these guns are unloaded, by the way. But if you look at this Blackhawk here, if you pull the trigger doesn't do anything. You have to pull that hammer back, and the only thing that trigger does is drop the hammer on the cylinder. Now, if you look at a double action revolver, again, it's unloaded. The trigger can cock the hammer back and release it, so you can just pull the trigger, or you can pull the hammer back and then pull the trigger. So that's the difference between a single action and a double action revolver for anybody who doesn't know the difference between the two. Now, what are each type of revolver good for? Well, there are several different roles that you might want to have a revolver fill. Number one would be concealed carry or even open carry when you're out in public for protection. So obviously a smaller gun like this SP101 would be a good option. So you have a small 2.5 inch barrel, 5 shots, 357 Magnum, 38 Special, whatever. And this is a double action revolver. Now you really want a double action revolver for this role, and the reason for that is because if you pull that gun, you want to not think about much of anything other than pulling that trigger. If you have to pull the gun out and then cock your hammer, that's more than you want to have to worry about. So you want to have a good double action revolver so that you don't have to, it takes the thinking out of firing the gun, because if you have to pull that gun and then cock the hammer and then pull the trigger, that's just extra steps, and that's something that can go wrong. You might not, under stress, you might not get the hammer all the way back, and there's just all kinds of things that can go wrong. Now, I'm not saying that people couldn't do it. Trust me, there's lots of cowboy action shooters out there that can shoot really, really fast, and they could definitely do it. But for the average person, not so much. And in fact, this is what you would call a double action, single action revolver, where you can still shoot it in single action. A lot of people like just a double action only, where this is all shrouded and you can't even get to a hammer, where the hammer's all internal. People like those because they don't snag on anything. You don't have this extra hammer here, this snag point here when you're pulling your gun out of your pants or out of your holster or wherever. So that's what that's good for. I tend to like a hammer so that I can shoot single action if I wanted to, but a lot of people prefer that double action only. What a single action revolver is good for, number one, a lot of single action revolvers, especially in 22, are just cheaper revolvers. They're not necessarily cheap like they're junk, but they're cheap as in they just cost less a lot of the times, especially in 22s like this Ruger Wrangler or a Heritage Rough Rider. They're just very inexpensive, and they're good. They're just good plinking guns. So if you want to get one of these for your kids or whatever, this is just a good gun for that. It's also a good sidearm for hunting like squirrels and stuff. And in fact, that's where I think that single action revolvers do excel. Another option for a single action revolver, being a 22, is for practice if you are wanting to get into cowboy action shooting, because cowboy action shooting, you would take a gun much like this. This is a Ruger Vaquero and .45 Colt. You know, a Ruger Wrangler or something like that serves as a good training tool because it's a lot cheaper to shoot 22 than it is to shoot .45 Colt and practice with that. So that makes a good training tool. But a gun like this, like I said, is good for cowboy action shooting. You of course need two of them, at least in every cowboy action shooting event that I can think of. You need two revolvers if you're you know, in that class. But yeah, so this is a good gun for that. It's also just, again, like I said, a good gun for plinking. You could use it for hunting. It doesn't have the best sights, like say on this Black Hawk here. This, I think, is the ideal gun for hunting, or a Super Black Hawk is a much better gun for hunting, in my opinion, than a double action revolver, because you have that nice short trigger pull. So you just pull the hammer back, you get your sights on target, and you just pull that trigger away. There are, you know, Super Blackhawks, some like Super Blackhawk hunters that have scope mounts, and you could even just take off the rear sight here and have a scope mount there as well. If you want a scope, if you want to like specifically handgun hunt, a gun like this is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. Of course, you could go with a double action revolver in that same role, but I think a double action revolver works better for a woods gun, in that a woods gun is a gun that you carry in the woods for protection, not necessarily for hunting. So, you know, a single action revolver makes a good hunting revolver. This makes a good woods gun for protection, because if an animal is charging you, you can pull that gun out and just pull that trigger, and you have your shot, as opposed to, again, like with the concealed carry, that's just one less thing for you to think about when having to pull your gun to use it. So, in other words, a double action revolver, in my opinion, is better for protection, whether it's woods protection from animals or protection from humans when you're out and about, or even at home if you choose to use a revolver for your home defense weapon. That's not really my choice, but I would definitely go with a double action revolver over a single action revolver for that role. A single action revolver is, again, a good plinking gun. Of course, a double action revolver is good for that too, but they're also good for, obviously, cowboy action, because you can't use a double action for that, and for hunting. Hunting, I think the single action revolver is the king of revolvers when it comes to hunting, but that's just my opinion. A lot of people like those big, you know, 500 Magnum, 460 Magnum revolvers, which, as far as I know, they only come in double action, but I could be wrong. But I know a lot of people like those guns. Those are a bit overkill for me. I think, you know, 44 Magnum, 41 Magnum, .45 Colt, maybe even a .454 Casull. You know, those revolvers are great for hunting. I don't really think you need to go any bigger than that unless you feel like you need to compensate for something. I mean, I guess they probably would work better for bears, but all those other revolver cartridges would work just fine, and they have less recoil. So, but that's just my opinion. So anyway, that's single action revolvers versus double action revolvers, and where I think they shine.
Hey, before I go, I just thought I'd remind everybody that I do have a second channel called Redneck Off the Range. Over there, I post most of my non-gun related content, so whether it's a video on my new tractor, my power tools, my projects that I'm working on, maybe wild game recipes, or just a random vlog, I post all of this kind of content over on my secondary channel. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go check it out, Redneck Off the Range. But that's all for this video, so subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm Redneck Mini 14, and until next time, be safe.